Welcome back. Moving forward in this lesson, we are going to go ahead and create an instance so that we could go ahead and install GitLab, right, within the Kubernetes engine. So in the previous lesson, we took a look at how we can create a Kubernetes cluster, right? So the basic cluster contained, the cluster size was 2 with 2-core CPU with a memory of 7.5 gigs. Now by default, once you create a cluster, it also creates some instances, right? So we're going to go ahead and take a look at those, and we are going to go ahead and create our own instance. So let's move on. Let's go to our menu here, and let's navigate to Compute Engine. That's where all the VM instances are. So I'm going to click on Compute Engine here, and this is going to display all of these instances. And recall, we have our 2 instances, and we're going to go ahead and create our new instance. So I'm going to click on Create Instance, and it's a pretty straightforward process. So just give it a name. I'm going to call it, let's say, GitLab, and then select the zone, whether it's Central or Eastern, wherever you want to create it. So it just depends on your own requirement, right? So I'm going to leave it as 1C Central. The machine type, as usual, you can select the machine type. You can also choose to deploy the container image to this VM instance. We're not going to do that right now. We're just going to create a basic instance for our GitLab installation later on. The boot disk is, I'm going to change that because I want to select the Ubuntu OS, right? That's what I'm going to use when I connect using the shell. And I like to also increase the size of the disk. So instead of 10, maybe it's 30 or 40 gigs or whatever. So I'm going to click on change here. And this lists all of the OS images. So you can have Debian, CentOS, Ubuntu, Red Hat, and so on. So if I scroll down just so that you can see Windows Server, R2 Data Center, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and select the latest version, which is, I believe, the 16 version of Ubuntu, which is right here, where I'm going to use the 16.04, even though it's 18.04, the latest. You could use 18, that's fine. Well, let's use 18. Let's stay ahead of the game. And then the size of the disk, I'm going to change it to 40. The standard persistent disk, the size is going to be 40 gigabytes. Now once I'm done, I can go ahead and simply select, and this shows me the new 40 gig standard persistent disk with the Ubuntu 18.04 latest version. I'm going to have the allow default access as it is, and of course allow the HTTP traffic and also the secure traffic as well. And that's about it. So as soon as I've created the instance, I've given it a name, certain parameters here, click create, and this is going to go ahead and create the instance called GitLab. So it takes about maybe sometimes a minute, less than a minute, sometimes more than a minute, depending on where it's going to go ahead and create the instance at. Perfect. So looks like our GitLab instance has been created, and it also provides us the internal IP address as well as the external IP address, and this is important. So you want to make a note of this IP address, or both IP addresses if you choose to, but importantly we will be using the external IP address later on. So somewhere in the notepad, right, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this for now and bring up our notepad buddy here and just paste the IP address, or just type it 12.45, and this is the GitLab, right? So I remember. Perfect. And notice it gives you the ability to connect to the SSH. So I'm going to go ahead and test it out. Click on the SSH, and this is going to bring up a dialog box. It's going to connect to the shell. Perfect. So I am now connected to the instance itself, right? And just kind of gives me the basic information. Welcome to Ubuntu 18.04. That's the version that I'm using of Linux. And then my system information. Of course, the programs included with the Ubuntu system. And I have the command line. Now here, of course, I can run the apt-get upgrade or update rather, commands, and so on. So right now, if I were to look at the directory here, there's nothing in there, right? It's just blank. So I'm going to go ahead and then later on demonstrate how we can actually install GitLab on our Ubuntu machine. So see what's going on here, right? Again, moving ahead on a macro level, we're working with the Google Cloud Platform. We've created a Kubernetes cluster. We've also created an instance. And now our instance has an IP address, right? And we're going to use that IP address in GitLab and then kind of connect, right? And I'm going to show that later on in subsequent lectures, but you get the idea of where we're heading, right? So once we've tested a successful connection with our instance, next step is, of course, to install GitLab. So I hope this helps. Go ahead, practice how to create an instance. Fairly straightforward, but the important element is why are we doing this, right? So as long as you're good with that, I'm okay. If you have any questions, post in the discussions area. I'll be more than happy to help. So let's move on to the next lecture.